But in that story that we read, when the disciples in the boat with this dreadful storm raging around them, when they cried out to Jesus, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown," what do you think they were actually expecting Jesus to do? Whatever it was, I'm pretty certain they were not expecting him to still the storm. You see, this incident happens fairly early in the ministry of Jesus. And the disciples haven't yet seen clearly who Jesus is. If you'd asked them, "Why are you crying out to Jesus for help?" they would not have said, "Oh, we are appealing to Jesus for help because we understand that he is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He's the Son of the Father, the one who created the heavens and the earth. Therefore, he is Lord of all creation." Of course, they wouldn't have said that. Partly because the storm was causing them to flap around in panic, but also because they hadn't seen that yet. It wasn't until after the resurrection that they really came to understand what it means to say Jesus is Lord. And in this very story, when Jesus does still the storm, we read that they were absolutely amazed. Whatever it was they were expecting, it wasn't that. You see, they are crying out in panic because they think they're going to drown. They haven't thought rationally, "I wonder if Jesus might be able to work a miracle to save us." And if you'd asked them, "What are you expecting him to do?" I don't think they'd have had an answer. You see, apart from anything else, 4 of these disciples are professional fishermen. They would have known better than anybody how to handle a boat in a storm. So if they couldn't cope, why would they assume Jesus could? The trade that Jesus, humanly speaking, had been brought up to was that of a carpenter. Not a fisherman, not a sailor. He might well have known how to build a boat, but why would they assume that he was any better at sailing one than they were? And yet, they come to him panicking and saying, "Lord, help, help! We're drowning." I think all we can say is they've started to learn that Jesus can do remarkable things. That there is something special about him. They've seen him healing people with leprosy, healing the centurion's servant. It happens at the beginning of this chapter. Healing many other people around Capernaum. They don't yet know fully, properly, who Jesus is. But they know there's something about him. He's someone you can turn to in a crisis. We don't understand what he's going to do, but he's someone you can cry to for help. And that's what they're doing. This isn't a cry of faith, "Lord, save us," because we're confident that you can. It's a cry of panic. And in fact, Jesus, after he's stilled the storm and is talking with them, comments on their little faith. And yet Jesus still intervenes and saves them in a way that goes beyond what they might have expected and leaves them amazed. And I think that has a lot of encouragement for us. 3 lessons, in fact. Jesus can do great and mighty things even when we have, firstly, little faith. Little faith. Jesus can do more than at the moment we have the faith to expect that he will. He's able to do exceedingly more than all we ask or imagine. Now, I'm not saying faith doesn't matter. Of course it matters. Matters enormously. It's faith alone that enables us to be confident in our salvation, in our relationship with God. But although Jesus says that these disciples have little faith, he can still do big things in response to little faith. I may have little faith, but I don't have a little Jesus. I have a big Jesus who can do big things in response even to little faith. You know, Jesus can and does respond to people who cry out to him, even if it's not yet from the basis of a strong and rock-solid faith. Jesus did in fact say, didn't he, that if we have faith that is the size of a mustard seed, we can move a mountain. So long as it is faith in Jesus. Faith in Jesus, faith that is the size of a mustard seed in Jesus can move mountains. Faith the size of a mountain, if it's faith in anything else, if it's faith in me, if it's faith in my faith, if it's faith in the church, that isn't going to move a mustard seed. But faith the size of a mustard seed, if it is just crying out to Jesus, can move mountains or still storms. See, Jesus can do remarkable things even for people who aren't Christians yet. People who are crying out to the unknown God. But he can do marvelous things for them. He can do things for people who are very new Christians, as these disciples were. They were raw and inexperienced disciples. They were Christian beginners. And yet Jesus works an amazing and mighty miracle for them. Jesus can do great and mighty things for you. Even if you think your faith isn't very big, as long as it's faith in him, as long as it's crying out to him, Jesus can do great things even if first we have little faith. Secondly, even if we have little understanding. See, Jesus doesn't respond to understanding, but to our need. How much did these disciples at this point understand about Jesus, about what he was going to do for them? Well, frankly, not a lot. They don't yet know anything about the cross and resurrection. They haven't got their theology of Jesus sorted out. And yet Jesus does a great and mighty work for them. In chapter 9, verses 25 and 26, we read that Jesus does great works of grace and healing for the crowd who are like sheep without a shepherd. This crowd don't know that in fact the good shepherd is right there among them. And yet Jesus responds to their needs anyway. Now again, I'm not saying that it's not important to grow in understanding. It does matter. But that does not mean that Jesus won't do anything for us until we've got a more mature grasp of doctrine. Whenever anyone comes to Jesus with a need, he never tells them, I'm sorry, you're just a beginner. Go and get your theology sorted out. Learn more, understand more. And when you've got your understanding of proper doctrine sorted out, then come back and maybe I can do something for you. Never. Never. He always stretches out his hand to save, to heal, to bless. Jesus does things for people who have minimal understanding. Now, growing in understanding matters, just as growing in faith enables us to become increasingly confident in our secure relationship with God, our salvation with God. So growing in understanding equips us to be better disciples of Jesus, better servants of his kingdom. But that does not mean he won't do anything for us until we've graduated out of, Christian reception class. His response to our cry for help is never on the basis of how much we understand. It's on the basis of how urgently we cry to him. It's on the basis of his concern for us, not our understanding of him. So Jesus can do great and mighty things even if we have, first, little faith, secondly, little understanding, and thirdly, little confidence. These disciples were not confident. They were afraid. They were scared stiff. Jesus, in fact, will later ask them, why were you so afraid? But that is after he has wonderfully and miraculously rescued them. Jesus can and does respond to those who cry out in fear. Save us, they say. I don't think they really know what they want Jesus to do. They just know they need help. And so they cry, help! And Jesus does help them in his way. And there are times when all you can do is cry out to God, help! Just say, as a general principle, it is good to call out to Jesus to intervene and do things and save people without our telling him in prayer how he ought to go about it. I think sometimes we're very good in what we think is prayer at giving Jesus good advice about how he ought to do it. I've got this theory that Jesus actually understands better than we do what he ought to do. What he responds to is that cry. You call on the name of the Lord and you will be saved. I think there is a place for more focused and specific prayer, but there are those times when all somebody can do is cry to the Lord. And these disciples say save, which of course can have a purely human sense. Rescue us. We're in danger. We're drowning. But of course, in the Bible, it also has a much bigger spiritual sense of redemption, being set free from sin. And I think whichever sense it is that we're using the word, either or both, we can cry to him. When we're dealing with a crisis or with people who are in a crisis, how do we know how to pray for some of the mess that people find themselves in? But what we can do is call on the Lord and say, help. We may not be confident about how it's going to happen. These disciples weren't. But we can still say, help. Do you know the shortest prayer in the Bible is in Matthew 14, when Peter confidently stepped out of the boat to walk on the water to Jesus. If Jesus can do it, I can do it. And then, after a few moments, he sees the waves, he sees the storm, and he thinks, what am I doing? Takes his eye off Jesus and he starts sinking. Now, here's the shortest prayer in the Bible. He just cries out, Lord, save me. That's it. That's it. what's Jesus' response? Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Jesus doesn't say, come on, Peter, you can pray a better prayer than that. 3 words, oh, come on. No, not a bit of it. Lord, save me. And Jesus reaches out his hand and catches hold of Peter. So simple help prayers are perfectly okay when first we're dealing with a crisis. And secondly, when we are simply calling on the Lord to intervene and save people. Maybe a specific person who's on our heart, maybe our community in general. But we don't know how best to pray, but we can just cry to the Lord, help. Now, the Spirit can help us. Paul says in Romans, when we don't know how to pray for the best, the Spirit can help us. But sometimes all we feel humanly we can do is cry help. And God here, in the person of his Son Jesus, intervenes and does a mighty miracle and stills the storm. These disciples at this stage had little faith, less understanding, and frankly, absolutely no confidence. Yet Jesus responded to their cry by intervening to do something for them that they found amazing. Can I encourage you? Don't waste time lamenting that your faith isn't very big. Just take what little mustard seed, what little speck of faith you've got, and cry out to the Lord for the things that matter to you, that are urgent. Lord, help us. And don't see your little faith, if that's what you feel you've got, don't see it as a reason for not bothering to pray because Jesus isn't likely to respond to me because my faith isn't very big. If it's just calling out to him, he hears it. And with these disciples here, he responds. Our Jesus does big things in response to little faith and little prayers. Because our Jesus is a great big Jesus who does great big things. Amen?